Deontay Wilder versus Gerald Washington. Not a lot of people have high hopes for this fight. Now, I just go for the amateur records, professionals, whatnot, like I usually do. Deontay Wilder amateur record: 30 wins, 5 losses, which is quite good. His highest achievement in amateurs was a bronze medal in the Beijing Olympics. Washington has only had 14 amateur fights. I've watched a lot of his interviews. It doesn't seem like he's never said he's won all his amateur fights. There must be a few losses on there, but I don't know the exact win-loss ratio. It's just 14 fights I know Washington has had. That's all I can find out about that. Professional record for Wilder's obviously 37 wins, 36 knockouts, 97% KO rate. Wilder does score on a lot about having the highest KO rate in the heavyweight division right now, even though Anthony Joshua has a 100% KO rate. And even if we're just talking about belt holders, Anthony Joshua has the IBF belt. So anyway, Wilder tries to cut it. He's still not the highest KO rate in the heavyweight division. Gerald Washington, 18 wins, no losses, 1 draw, 12 knockouts, a 63% KO rate. So it's very clear right from the start, Deontay Wilder has far more power than Gerald Washington. Height, they're both very big guys. Deontay Wilder's height 6'7", he's got an 83-inch reach, which gives him a 1-inch height and reach advantage over Gerald Washington. But Gerald Washington's got he's got a lot bigger frame than Deontay Wilder. He's far more muscular than Deontay Wilder. So Deontay Wilder weighed in at his last fight at 226 pounds. Gerald Washington weighed in at 243 pounds. So I think Gerald Washington's going to be a stronger, much stronger opponent in clinches, or there's any pushing or shoving or that going on. Best opponents, Deontay Wilder's two notable wins are Malik Scott, which is kind of a notorious fight. He kind of gave up and then took a dive in the first round, and Bermine Stavern, who he beat by decision. Gerald Washington's only real notable win is against Eddie Chambers. Now, I'm just as frustrated as everyone else is with the choice of Deontay Wilder's opponents. But I do think Deontay Wilder is a top 10 heavyweight. I don't think he's in the top 5. I think there's about 9 heavyweights if you include Tyson Fury, who's a lot of people think is retired now, Wladimir Klitschko, who a lot of people think is on the way out now, and Alexander Povetkin, who's failed a drug test. If you include them, I think there's about 9 heavyweights right now that can either have a very good chance of beating Deontay Wilder or will beat Deontay Wilder very easily. So that's really my opinion of Deontay Wilder. I do think he's a top 10 fighter, but I don't rate him very highly. I don't think he's the most skilled heavyweight. I think the best thing Deontay Wilder's got going for him, of course, is his size, his height and his reach. He's fast, he does have speed, he has a lot of punching power, he has excellent stamina. I've got to give Deontay Wilder that. Whenever Duhaupas, Stavern, he was not gassed at the end of them fights. He looked like he could go another few rounds. Really does have a lot of good stamina. Confidence, I think he's going to be confident looking at this Gerald Washington fight anyway. He seems very confident, he's looking past it. People might say that's a weakness. Yeah, it could be for this fight. But he does have a lot of confidence, at least for this fight. As a whole, does he have confidence in the division? I don't think so. I think by the choice of his opponents, it shows lack of confidence in himself. And I tell you the truth, I think Deontay Wilder's just waiting for the big money fight. I don't think he has that much confidence in himself in this division. People are really split down the middle of their opinion to Gerald Washington. Some people think he's quite talented. Some people think he's just another one of these ex-basketball, football players that are pretty useless in a division, like Charles Martin and Dominic Breazeale. But I think Washington's more talented, much more talented than them two fighters. I have to say, a few things that I think are going to work well for Washington in this fight against Deontay Wilder is the fact that Washington's very good at using his size to his advantage in a fight. He's very good at working behind the jab, keeping away from his opponents, and just not letting them get close enough to punch him. Obviously, that he wouldn't still have that advantage against Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder's a big fighter himself. But when I've watched both of them fight taller fighters, for example, Washington fought Skip Scott, 6'8", and Wilder fought Kelvin Price, who's 6'7". I watched them both fight taller fighters, and Washington seemed to take on a bigger fighter and looked far more impressively in that fight against Skip Scott than Deontay Wilder did against Kelvin Price. Now, a lot of people will say Deontay Wilder has improved a lot since then. I just completely disagree with that. I don't think Deontay Wilder's made any progress at all on his skill. But on the other hand, I think Gerald Washington has made improvements because he gets a lot of stick for the Amir Mansour fight. And I still do think he was using his height to his advantage very well in that fight and working behind the jab. It wasn't his most impressive performance, but the good thing I think about that, what he took away from that, is he managed to learn and he fought a better opponent, Eddie Chambers, after, and his performance was far better. You could tell he'd learned a lot from the Amir Mansour fight. He'd taken away a lot from it, and he gave a far better performance. The other things that I like about Washington going into this Deontay Wilder fight is when I've watched him as well, it seems like he does stick to his game plan very well. It seems like he's quite smart and he's a good thinking fighter. He's got good ring IQ. He listens to his trainer. And if I was to be honest with everybody, I think when you're comparing Deontay Wilder and Washington, even though Deontay Wilder's faster and certainly punches far, far harder, I think Washington is actually a more skilled boxer than Deontay Wilder. Even though he's had half the amateur fights, or less than half the amateur fights, and half the professional fights as Deontay Wilder, I think watching Washington, he doesn't get himself off balance like Deontay Wilder does. He doesn't loop his punches, leave himself open, really wild amateur stuff. And unlike Deontay Wilder, like I already said, Gerald Washington is very good at actually using his height to his advantage, where I think Deontay Wilder proved he's not very good at that, especially with the Spielka fight, where Spielka was outboxing him. Just one other thing that does show that Gerald Washington does have reasonably good ring IQ. I'm not trying to say Gerald Washington's going to be a long-term top 10 heavyweight. I think he could get into the top 10, but not a long-term. I think Gerald Washington, at least when I was fighting Eddie Chambers, he would throw punches and then smother Eddie Chambers, or throw punches and get Eddie Chambers off balance so he couldn't counter him, and I thought that was quite impressive and smart. I do have some worries about Gerald Washington though. His stamina, especially when he was watching the Eddie Chambers fight, he was throwing about 55 punches around in the Eddie Chambers fight, and I was really impressed. I thought this guy, he's got a really high work rate. If he can keep this up for the whole fight, it's going to be really impressive. But after the fourth round, you could see he was breathing quite hard. He'd slow down his pace, his work rate fell. He's a bit more sloppy, wasn't moving around as much, and Eddie Chambers was capitalising on that and took advantage of that and actually started to fight better in the second half of that fight. So the stamina issue for Gerald Washington, I am worried about that. Just like I said, Deontay Wilder has excellent stamina. I'm worried about how well Gerald Washington can take a punch, because Gerald Washington has not fought even a power puncher before, let alone someone with Deontay Wilder's punching power. But saying that, Gerald Washington's a huge guy. So like I say, he's got a naturally big frame. He's a naturally big guy with a lot of muscle. And there's a bigger guy is, on average, can take a punch better than a smaller guy. So when you're that size, you do expect him to have some good punch resistance. It's not always a given. It's not always a fact. But you look at Dominic Breazeale against Anthony Joshua. Vitaly Klitschko, just iron chin. Maybe Gerald Washington does have an iron chin as well. I'm not saying just because of his size, but that can happen. But he should be able to take a punch very well for his size, because of his size. It's, Gerald Washington's always looked very confident in all his fights up to now. I don't think he was the favourite against Eddie Chambers, but he went into that. He looked confident. He fought to a game plan, and it worked. Hopefully, he's going to be just as confident against Deontay Wilder, but he might not be. So that's another thing I'm worried about. Deontay Wilder is going into this maybe too confident, overconfident. But it's better to be overconfident, of course, than having low confidence. So that's just one thing I'm worried about Gerald Washington as well. Do I think Gerald Washington can beat Deontay Wilder? Yes, I do. I do think he can beat Deontay Wilder. I think he's got a few things going for him. Just like I said, using his height well, his size. I mean, to be able to stick to a game plan. He's quite smart in the ring, I think, as well. And yeah, but am I going to lean towards Gerald Washington in this fight? No, I think Gerald Washington is going to cause Deontay Wilder a lot of problems at the start of this fight. I can see Gerald Washington winning a few rounds at the start of this fight before his stamina starts to let him down and Deontay Wilder taking over. Do I think Deontay Wilder is going to win this fight by knockout? No, I don't. I'm actually going to lean towards Deontay Wilder winning this fight by unanimous decision, with Gerald Washington causing him quite a few problems and winning a few rounds off Deontay Wilder.